If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell icon to get the latest updates.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a very good weekend last week, and it's a good way to start, the process like integrated business planning process right from the Monday. So, welcome you all. To begin with, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Sam, and I'm based out in India. So I am basically a corporate trainer as well as a supply chain professional. So in total, I have about 20 plus years of experience in the end-to-end supply chain management, starting off with demand planning, supply planning, production planning, inventory management, warehouse logistics, customer service, and also, the manufacturing operations management. So with respect to the training, we'll be focusing on the supply chain processes like integrated business planning, which is the most advanced process, which is mostly adopted by many organizations nowadays. So I think it will be very, very interesting and helpful for all of you. So to start off with this, I would just like to have a small introduction from all the participants. So I'll just switch my screens and uh, we'll go to the next slides. Okay. So first of all, this is the disclaimer slide. The presentations and the examples which we are going to discuss are only for the information purpose, only for the information purpose only. So we have to comply with all the applicable copyrights, and it would be the responsibility of the users. Okay. With limiting the rights under copyrights, no part of the document may be reproduced or stored or introduced into a retrieval system or transmitted in any form or by any means. So I think everybody is well aware about the data privacy. So we have to respect and adhere to the data privacy policies. And credits shall be given to all the images taken from the open source and cannot be used for promotional activity. I think this is the most important point. So during the presentation, we'll stick to the basic agenda, the basic ground rules, and we'll take you through. So to start off with the introduction slide, I would like you all to introduce yourself about, the brief summary about your personal background, your educational background, whichever you feel comfortable sharing. Then how long have you been working in this organization? What is your role in this organization and what is the focus area? Because this will help us to understand into the deep dive of so many different processes within the supply chain and within the umbrella of IBP. So any one of you has already worked on the IBP. So if that is the case, you can let me know so we can, get into the more advanced topics going forward. And last but not the least, what is your expectation from this training? So I'll just note down the expectation from each and every individual, and then we'll work out whether we are in line with the expectations during the training. So I think we can start off with anyone, maybe with Victoria. Would you like to go first?
Yes, my name is Victoria Sabrin. I've been working with ASR for over 9 years. I've recently been moved into the Center of Excellence group as the planning manager. And I have worked with IBP since 2018, so going on about 5 years. But I've worked on it as an end user, not so much on the master data side. So I'm hoping to learn more about the master data tables and just how to better use IBP to just be able to work with the system better in my new role.
Okay, that's perfect. That's very good. Thank you very much. Can we move on to the next one? You can nominate yourself.
Hey, good morning. I can go first after Victoria. My name is Vaibhav. I'm based out of Toronto, working for Red Pat Sugar. I have been using IBP for the past 7 months as an end user. So I've been with ASR for a total of 3 years, coming from a logistics and warehousing background, moving into demand planning. For the past 7 months, I have been using IBP to provide data and analyze. But I echo what Victoria said. My expectation from this training is to be well versed with master data and solve any issues. For example, if any ingredient, you see a component demand for a certain ingredient, I want to be able to, go into the master data and fix it and create templates for different functions of the business and provide visibility. That's my expectation out of the training. Thank you.
Okay. So Vaibhav, basically, apart from IBP, what are the tools you use for your demand planning? Do you have the APO or any other tool for demand planning?
Right now, I'm only using IBP, nothing else
IBP.
for now.
Okay. Okay. So thanks a lot, Vaibhav. So should we go on to the next one?
Yep. I'm Shauna. I've been working with ASR for close to 5 years now. I've only been using IBP for the last, I would say 18 months or 2 years, as an end user, but I kind of had Victoria's predecessor in the UK for a little while, and he gave me little pieces of knowledge here and there, but it's very much tribal knowledge, so I've not had any formal training on that. But yeah, I'm only using IBP for demand planning, and as much as I do play around with master data, sometimes I've definitely got an expectation to learn some more there and fill in the gaps on my knowledge, really.
Okay. Okay, Shana. Thank you so much. So basically, the common points that are coming from all three of you are related to the master data management. Okay, so that's the extremely important point, to have the correct master data in place. Because the common terminology with the IT teams use is, the garbage in, garbage out. So for example, if your master data is incorrect, then your processes will go wrong, and in result, your output will also be equally bad. So master data, yes, it's extremely important, and it's the input to the process. So keeping a very focused approach on the master data is extremely important. Okay, so I think these are the three participants, right? So nobody else is expected for today's session, right?
Correct. Yes. Us three will be in all the sessions.
Okay. 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 So with this, we will move on to the materials section. So we'll start off with the today's session, SAP integrated business planning. Okay. So since you all are working on the integrated business planning, the IBP process, and you guys are quite experienced also in the IBP process. So what exactly you understand from the word integrated in your organization? So can anyone or three of you help me to understand?
My understanding for the word here is it's taking all the data from our ERP system, SAP, and integrating that to come up with analysis.
Okay, that's a good one. Anything else from you, Victoria?
That's exactly what I would have said.
Me too.
Okay. 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 You guys are absolutely correct. Integrated means integrating the various sets of data, various data sets, and various processes, so that all processes are interlinked, because supply chain is a very integrated process, because it takes inputs from so many people, so many different functions, like commercial organization, like marketing organization, like product management group, quality management group, so on and so forth, purchasing. So these are the various inputs that supply chain team keeps on getting. But having said this, it's not only these data sets or the process which gets integrated into IBP. It's also the departments which gets integrated into the IBP. Okay, so if we go back to the organization switching over to IBP over an SNOP, is more of the integration related to the people, because people in the organizations or various departments in the organizations are very often working on silos. Okay, and they do not have a very interactive or integrated communications between them. That's one of the reason IBP is focusing on integrating the department sets. Okay, just to give you a simple example of the SNOP versus IBP process. SNOP is basically the sales and operations planning process. In SNOP, okay, we have basically the commercial organization or the sales organization and the supply chain organization, mainly the demand planning organization, is working together to define the forecast for the organization. And based on this forecast, they pass on the information to other teams like supply planning, the purchasing for procuring and product producing the materials. So at any given point in time, the key issue that organization or the top management in the organization is facing is related to the lack of information, the correct information for the top management. And also at any point in time, in the SNOP process, the top management observes that they have multiple operating plans. Okay, when I say multiple operating plans is at any given time, they would have two or three different plans. Number one, first plan is the commercial plan. The sales team is working on their sales forecast. So this is plan number one. Second plan is the demand planner, who basically talks to sales team and he defines the forecast. That is the second plan. And third, but the most important plan is the plan which finance team is working on, because in parallel, finance team is always putting up the projection for the revenues, for the profit margins, for the contribution margin, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, at the ground level, people are not fully integrated or aligned to each other. Okay, so that's the key driving factor for entire organization coming together and generating the single operating plan. So the whole fundamental on which the integrated business planning process is developed, it is basically an advanced version of the SNOP process, that is sales and operation planning process. But the key result which was expected from the IBP process is the integrated business plan. Okay, that is a single operating plan which is used across the organization. So as a end result of IBP process, the top management wants to see a one operating plan. Okay, and if they go to say, various departments, like for example, if they have let's take an example, if the organization is working on the let's say on the volume, it's a volume based organization, not a value based organization. For example, the organization is working on so much tonnage of volume to be able to ship every month. Okay, so we call it as an volume based organization because the focus on shipping the volume, producing the volume. Okay, and for an example, let's take an example that this organization is producing 10,000 kilopounds of 10,000 pounds of sugar. Or okay, so top management wants to see the same plan across various departments. In SNOP, they sometimes see 10,000 pounds of sugar plan from the commercial organization. In supply chain, because they are working on the inventory, they have very strict target. They may see that the inventory plan is less than 10,000. For the warehousing guy, because he knows that he has to supply material on time, or for the inventory planner, if he would say that my focus area is on the inventory control. So every single department in the past was working on little silos. I won't say it's the 100% silos, but to certain extent it was working on the silos. There's a reason, the IBP process was introduced so that all the departments come together, they discuss with each other, and they formulate a plan. Okay, so that's how the IBP process was introduced by the organization, and very rapidly or very fast it was adopted by the pharmaceutical organizations, and they succeeded with the IBP process, and the end results that they got is much improved revenue. Their revenues has increased manifold because everybody was aligned to one goal. Their inventory was reduced because every person in the organization responsible to produce or responsible to manage the inventory is working on the same plan. Their profitability increased because they also focused on the cost factors. So these are the various benefits that the organization got because of the integrated business planning. So that's a little background about why integrated business planning, came into picture and why it is so successful. Okay, so are you with me? Do you have any questions so far? Am I going very fast? Am I slow or
All good?
sorry?
You're
So all
going
good
good.
on my end.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay, so every time you see this new module being introduced, you will see this disclaimer so that the ground rules are set and followed every time. Okay, now we move on to the high level agenda for module one. So module one basically talks about introduction of IBP because introduction is extremely important for all of us to understand why IBP. Okay, because that once that why question is answered in proper way, and once it is convinced by everybody in the organization, they will be ready to accept IBP with a broader minds. Then the overview of IBP, then key features, applications used, high level solution architecture, how the IBP planning system works, various modules within the IBP. Now, some organization, restrict themselves to a very limited module, let's say of demand planning. They don't roll out the entire IBP. And in the due course of time, when they get the benefits from rolling out of first module, they switch on to the different levels of modules. Excel user interface. Okay, now another good aspect of IBP is, it is extremely easy to use. Okay, and it has got extremely good user interface. Like you can download the data from the tool into Excel spreadsheet. You can slice it and dicing, do the slicing and dicing of the data. You can create various reports and MIS reports by crunching the data. So it's extremely user friendly. That's the feedback from various organization. And the last point that we'll be focusing on the time series based supply planning. So how the supply planning process works on, on the various horizons. Horizons means the span of time. Shall we move on? Okay. Now, you're able to see the screen, right? Slide number 4.
Yep.
Okay. So now this is the basic diagram of integrated business planning. It is extremely simple, but it covers all the small aspects of the IBP process. So it works on both the points. It works on bottoms up approach as well as the top down approach. So when I say bottoms up approach, it talks about a very transactional level activity. like the demand forecast, sitting up with the commercial organization and discussing the forecast at the customer material level combination, challenging each other, stuff like that. So it starts off with a very basic and bottom line activity within the organization, and then it slowly moves on to the top management, to give them a bird's eye view. So this is how it works from the bottoms up approach. At the same time, even the top management always have the visibility of what's going on in the organization, and they can figure out the pulse of the organization. When I say pulse of the organization, they know where our organization is heading. That's why I call it as both top down as well as bottoms up approach. So basically, you see the yellow line at the bottom. So IBP basically works on the SAP HANA platform for cloud deployment. So SAP HANA, does anyone know what is SAP HANA? What is the full form, or what is the abbreviation for HANA? Okay, so HANA is basically high performance application analytics. So basically, it talks about it gives you extremely fast solutions at a very critical processes. So it integrates the data very quickly. So SAP HANA basically converts the data sets very fast into the meaningful data. And IBP is built on the SAP HANA platform. So the platform for IBP is SAP HANA. Now at the next level, you see, the four verticals. First is the demand, then inventory, then supply, and IBP for response. So some of the organizations, along with the demand planning or demand review, they also have the product management review. Like for example, the organization which is extremely good at introducing new products, for example. So okay, so they also have their module as product management module before the demand planning module. So what happens in the product management module is basically the product management team who's responsible for developing or launching the new products. They identify the project timeline for introducing the new products, and basically they give the kind of a project charter to the demand planning team that so and so products are being introduced, let's say in the month of August or in the month of September. So they will have a detailed level plan, because this organization, for example, is focusing on new product introduction every time, because their core strength is to get new products in the market, the new technologies in the market. So they have a extremely high level of focus on the research and development. So research and development as well as product management team will come up with new product technologies or new products which are being introduced in the organization, because that's also one of their key point of the revenue recognition and profit maximization. Okay, but for those organization who has same level of products which are being sold every time, okay, and they have very limited number of products which are introduced every year, so they do not have a much focused approach on the product management review. So they start off this IBP process with demand review. Now, in a nutshell, what happens is in the demand review is basically this is the beginning of the process, and this process is the starting point of every organization. And of course, to certain extent, this is also the end point of every organization, because that is where the forecasting accuracy is measured. So in the demand management, we have the team who's responsible for forecasting. Okay, so demand planner or demand manager is the person who is accountable and responsible for generation of for tabulating the demand. He is not actually responsible for generating the demand. The demand generation is done by the commercial organization or the sales organization. But this is the guy who actually in most of the organization is part of the supply chain team. However, in some of the organization in the recent times, the demand manager is also having a dotted line reporting to the commercial organization so that they are aligned on what's going on, in the business. So it's basically varies from business to business, but the basic responsibility of demand manager is to generate the forecast, the accurate forecast, because the forecasting accuracy will define, the accuracy of the organization in producing the goods, and it will also define the inventory levels for the organization. So what happens in the demand review, or what happens in this particular box? So basically, in the organization which is focused on the forecasting, so they have the sales team and the commercial team. When I say sales and commercial is basically the same organization with different terminologies. Okay, so now this sales team has a different hierarchy within their organization. Okay, for example, at the bottom level you may have, or at the entry level you may have the sales executive, then on top of them you may have the sales manager, and then you have the sales director, so on and so forth. So this every sales executive would be assigned to different customers, okay, based on the organization. For example, if the sales executive A, he has 3 customers under him, so he's responsible for identifying the forecast for these 3 customers. Okay, so now this sales manager will always have the very close interaction with his customers. He will get the inputs from his customers, and he will feed it in the tool. So now the tool can be of different types. It can be also a very simple tool like a simple Excel spreadsheet tool, or it can be a best tool, I would say, SAP APO, that is Advanced Planning and Optimizer. Okay, so but the basic idea for this person in the organization is to identify what's going on at the customer end. Okay, so he will daily interact with customers and get the inputs as to where his customers organization is heading and how much products the customer will buy from us. So this person at the end of the day, based on their internal process, he will identify, for customer A will take this product, customer B will take a different product. So he will identify this requirement of his customers. So we call it as a Salesforce input. So this is basically the input received by the Salesforce team within this organization from the customer, and he will tabulate that in the tool. Okay, whatever tool this organization is working on. And the next level is basically, the commercial or the sales manager. The sales manager will have a little wider approach. So he may have, let's say, 5 or 10 different sales executives working under him. So sales manager will look at a collective, the collated demand at a product level, or it can also individually, slice and dice the data and see which customers is progressing, which customer is not doing well. So basically, so they will define the actions from this. So this is the aggregate input that the sales team is collecting every month on a daily basis from various customers. Okay, and at the end of the month or at the beginning of the month, okay, they collate this information either in the tool or in the Excel spreadsheet, and they discuss with the demand planner. So demand planner basically is sometimes from the sales organization and sometimes from the supply chain organization. So the demand planner, basically what he will do is he will check the demand. Okay, and this guy is basically uh, uh, having a little bit of an analytical approach, because all the demand planners by nature, they are extremely good in the analysis, because they are always trying to crunch the data to identify or to generate the meaningful reports. So what they do is, they will get the collated demand. They will first try to map it with the sales history. Okay. And they will identify what are the outliers, like, where there is a disconnect. So for example, if the historical data shows that, a customer A has only, bought, let's say, a product one to the extent of, let's say, 1,000 pounds. And in the next 6 months forecast, the sales team has projected, let's say, 2,000 pounds. Then this is something not really a very, very realistic approach. Then in that case, demand planner normally, go back to the commercial organization and ask them as to, guys, the historical data shows that, this customer is buying only 1,000 pounds. Now you have projected about 2,000 pounds, almost the double forecast. So in that case, this process is basically called as challenging, the commercial organization. But having said this challenging process has to be extremely positive, and it has to be driven by data. So your data should always speak. You should not, go back and tell the commercial organization that, guys, we have sold only 1,000 pounds, and now you're forecasting about 2,000 pounds, which is almost double the demand. Then in that case, sales team will say, it's my responsibility to sell. So it needs to be a very, very healthy argument or discussion with the commercial organization, and your data should speak. So that is where, the IBP for demand comes into picture. So basically what it does is, if you have a good tool like IBP, or any other tool like SAP APO or something like that, so system or the tool will have its own algorithms. Okay, when I say algorithms are basically, the analytics formulas which are built in the tool, which, does their simulation at the back end. For example, so in the case which I have just explained to you, in that case your system will generate a forecast on its own, and it will show that, according to me, that is according to the tool or according to the system, the forecast should only be 1,000 pounds or 1,200 pounds. Okay, it should not be 2,000 pounds. So this forecast is called as a statistical forecast. So what statistical forecast does is, it works on the various factors which we call as an algorithms. So these algorithms are, basically the simulations within the tool, to identify what should be your future forecast. Okay, and these algorithms, uh, the number of algorithms may vary, based on the organizations and based on the approach, based on the, the strategies which organizations are adopting. For example, some of the organization who every month are selling a standard set of demand, they may use only moving average 3 or moving average 6 as the algorithm, and that will work best for them, because they know every month they are selling the same set of product to same customers, and the customer is going to buy in future as well. So just the moving average or the weighted average of past 6 months data will help them to identify the forecast, the system forecast or the statistical forecast for the future. Whereas, the organization which basically works on the seasonality. Okay, so these organization cannot take moving average as, the base for calculating the forecast. So system will automatically identify that this particular customer and his buying pattern does not fit in the moving average 3 algorithm. So system will suggest different algorithm, let's say a seasonality algorithm for a particular product, for a particular customer, and then it will generate the statistical forecast. So the reason I am telling you this is basically, this statistical forecast visibility is always there with the demand planner. Okay, so so demand planner is in the best judgment, to take the call or discuss with the commercial organization and finalize the final forecast. Okay, so what they do is basically they challenge the statistical forecast vis-a-vis the forecast which was given by the sales team, and then they finalize, they agree upon the final forecast. So this final forecast is what we call as a consensus forecast. So consensus forecast is basically the agreed forecast between sales team and the demand planning team. So that's how the process work in IBP for the demand management. So what it does is, at the end of this process, there is a review which is taken place, which normally is called as a demand review. So in this demand review, uh, first of all, the reason I said the IBP is an integrated business planning process is, and I also mentioned to you that it's not only the processes who are integrated, but it's also the departments or the individual person in the organizations are integrated. So for the demand review, generally the participants, who are conducting the demand review consist of a demand manager. So demand manager is the guy who's basically the head of demand planning. Okay. Then the commercial manager. Okay. The sales manager who's responsible for, customers and generating the sales. The marketing manager is also very important, because some of the organization, the marketing function is extremely important, because their revenue or their sales is based on some marketing tricks or some offers which are offered to the customer, some special discounts, something like that. So that's why marketing manager input is also required in the demand review. Then the most important function, which is not only executing the data, but it's also giving a very very valid input, is the finance organization. Okay, so basically even finance team or the finance manager participate in the demand review, because at the end of the demand review, the organization finalize the forecast, what we call as a demand forecast, and this is a single set of data which is passed on in the system, and it is circulated to all the other departments. So for example, in a nutshell, at the end of demand review, or to begin with, at the beginning of the demand review, demand planner has collected the information from sales team, and in fact sales team has also collected the information from their customer. At the same time, demand planner has also checked for any promotions or any new product launch by the product management group, and they have collated the forecast. At the same time, they also have another line of forecast which is generated by the system. So there is a one forecast generated by human beings and another forecast generated by the system being. So they discuss with each other and they finalize what should be the most realistic forecast, and then in the demand review they finalize this forecast. Okay, so this forecast is now an output of the demand planning review, and then it is moved on to the next levels in the IBP process. Okay, but having said this, the demand review is basically, as I said, is the output of the demand review, but the input of the other processes. At the same time, the accuracy is also measured as to which forecast is more accurate, whether the forecast generated by human or the forecast generated by system. Often in the organization which I have worked on, I have always seen that, though I was responsible for the demand planning team and my job was a demand manager, I always had lesser accuracy in forecast than what was generated by the system. So it was often proved that the system algorithms works better than human interventions. So that's it may not be correct for all the organization, but to certain extent, it is correct for certain organization. At the same time, one important factor of why demand forecast accuracy is important, because I would say universally everybody in the organization has accepted that the forecast is never going to be 100% accurate, and this is cast in stone. Even the top management or the CEO of the organization, he knows that whatever forecast is projected by his team or by himself for the future business, it may not be 100% accurate. If it is 80%, 90% accurate, then I would say, this organization is working extremely good. If it is 20%, 10% accurate, then the organization is not doing good. So basically, in short, when I was responsible as a demand manager, I used to tell, to the organization that I am the guy who's actually paid for making mistakes, because everybody has accepted that, the demand plan is always going to be wrong. Yes, the demand plan is always going to be wrong, but our job is to basically improve, the forecasting accuracy, because forecast is for most of the organization, forecast is basically input of entire process, of the entire operations management process. If forecast is controlled well, and if it shows good amount of accuracy, then the next work stream, which is inventory management, it becomes very easy for inventory planner to manage inventory because of high level of forecast accuracy. At the same time, the service level is good because we have good predictability of the products, because it is coming from the demand. And in short, the organization efficiency improves. So that's why I said I focused more on the demand planning, because it's the input and it needs to be extremely focused. So anyone has any questions so far? Are we all on the same page, or you're not able to understand certain things?
Quickly, I'm good so far. I understood everything you said. Are we going to cover statistical forecasting in the sessions to come?
Yes, at high level, yes, we'll be covering the statistical forecasting, but not the algorithms and other things. But you can ask your doubts, and during the session, whatever doubts you have, or we can I will list it down, and then I will try to cover each and every point that you ask about.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's how basically the demand review takes place. Now moving on to the demand review, next stage is basically the inventory review. So we have a terminology called as multi-stage inventory optimization and demand driven MRP. So I think everybody knows what MRP is, right?
Yes.
Okay, so MRP is basically material resource planning. Okay, so as I said, about the demand review. So assuming that at the end of the demand review cycle, we have a solid forecast. Okay, and which is basically what I will call as an operating plan. So operating plan is basically circulated to all the stakeholders within the organization, and and this demand planning or the demand plan is signed off by the demand planner or demand manager, the sales manager, okay, the head of sales department, okay, the marketing manager, if at all the marketing organization is there, the product management group, the finance manager, okay, and of course the supply chain manager. So these are basically the wider level of stakeholders, or the important stakeholders within IBP process. I am saying important, that does not mean everybody else is not important. In certain organization, even the human resource team, participate in the IBP process, so that they are aligned on where the organization is going. So that of course depends on the organization to organization level. So now, if once we have the input to the demand planning, then this same input is used by, I would first cover the IBP for supply, because after demand immediately, the supply comes into picture. And the outcome of supply plan is basically, the inventory management. So, okay, and one important point I missed out. Okay, the basic ground rule for the demand review is, and for the commercial organization is, they have to identify the forecast which is unconstrained forecast. Okay, when I say unconstrained forecast, that means sales team should not consider any constraint while he's putting the forecast, on paper. When I say constraint, the constraints related to the supply availability, because what happens, because they all work very closely, the sales team and the supply chain team are working very closely with each other, so they know where are the issues within the organization. Okay, so for example, a sales manager, knows that what his customer requires. At the same time, he knows from the pulse of the organization as to what he can supply to the customer, because he is always updated with the supply situation from the supply chain group. So while putting up the forecast for the subsequent month or for the future horizon, they know what are the constraints of the organization. Okay, so that leads to them, of for not putting the forecast as unconstrained. So for example, if let's say if a product A, which is having constrained supply because one of the raw materials is missing, so supply chain or production team or manufacturing team cannot produce it. So this information is always there with the commercial team or the sales team. So what they do is basically they know that I'm not going to get the supply. They will inform to customer that, guys, I will not be able to supply you for future requirements. Okay. So in the forecasting process, they will underestimate the demand. Okay, so that is called as a constrained demand. So while putting the forecast, they will put the constrained forecast because they know that supply situation is bad. Okay, so this is an issue in the organization, from the top management perspective. I'll come to that in few minutes. So now, because he has put the constraint forecast, at the same time, okay, the supply chain team is already knowing that there is a constraint in the supply. Okay, but they are always working on improving this constraint, and improving the availability. So what happens is when the forecast is constrained, so instead of the actual demand of let's say 10,000 pounds, sales team will put it as only 5,000 pounds because they know 5,000 pounds is what we can produce. But when this is gone as an input to the supply planning organization, they will say that, guys, I have received the input as only 5,000. So they will not put the efforts to produce 10,000 or to procure 10,000, wherein the actual demand or the actual market size is 10,000 or even more. So that's the reason a ground rule is set for every organization is to put unconstrained forecast, because this is what will drive, the actions for the other departments like inventory management department, for supply planning department, and also for the top management. So I'll come to the top management, decision making approach little later in the stage. Okay, so now we assume that, in the first place, the demand management team has entered an unconstrained forecast. Okay, and the IBP for supply is basically they have to now work on the inputs. So now this supply planning group comes into picture. So demand review is taking place in the first place. It may happen somewhere in the first week of the month. And in immediately after the demand review, when the input of the demand review is available, it is passed on to the supply review, and then IBP for supply cycle starts. Okay. So now the supply planning group looks at the unconstrained demand. Okay. They look at the supply constraints. Okay. What are the constraints in the supply? And they identify what are the issues. So basically, at the end of the supply planning group, now they have to work on the demand. They have to ensure that this demand is met, and if it is having some issues of missing raw materials or missing packaging materials, something like that, then they have to work internally to make sure that the supply is available. So basically, the job of supply review is to take input from demand review. Okay. Tab it with the inventory available, tab it with the future supplies plan, and then identify what are the gaps. At the same time, they also have to work with production team on whether they have, or the manufacturing team, whether they have enough capacities and resources in place. Okay, so they will work on that. So at the end of the supply planning, they will identify a unconstrained supply and unconstrained demand. Okay, so in one case, in a particular point, because there is an unconstrained demand, they will also assume that if there is an unconstrained supply, if I am able to make this supply, I can meet the demand to the extent of 100%. So that is called as unconstrained supply. But we are not in the ideal world. So there is always going to be some or the other issue which is impacting the supply availability. At the same time, because we have already accepted that the forecast will also not be 100% accurate. So there is always going to be some issues with the actual demand versus the forecast demand. So in the supply planning group, okay, now the supply review basically takes place, and the team or the participants which participate in the supply review is the demand manager, okay, the supply chain manager, okay, the inventory manager, or the inventory. When I say manager or his designate, he can also designate some of his team members who are actually involved in the process, or the warehouse manager, and also finance manager and sales manager. So even the sales team is participating in the supply review for most of the organization. Now I'm giving you this process details which is adopted by majority of the organization. Now for your organization, some of the things may not be required. If you feel that for the demand review, basically a marketing person is not required because he doesn't have much of the inputs for this process, then you can take the call and design your IBP process in such a way that it is meaningful, and everybody in the meeting is participating and contributing in the positive way. So these are the people or the team members who are basically working on the supply review group. So at the end of the supply review, their job is their objective is to identify the supply availability uh, in two ways: unconstrained as well as constrained supplies. And to the extent of the constrained supply, they have to come up with the action plans. Now these action plans would some of the action plans would be within their control. Okay, for example, if one of the vendor or one of the supplier is not supplying goods on time, then in that case, the topmost hierarchy in the supply chain can go visit the vendor or discuss with the vendor and use the escalation matrix to get the supply on time. However, for the things related to manufacturing organization, if we do not have the capacity to produce against the unconstrained demand, then that action would go to the top management, because there would be some investment coming out, investment requirements coming out as the action for this. So that's the reason it's extremely important to define the actions, as to what exactly is needed for the organization to support the unconstrained demand. Remember one thing, the objective of every individual in the organization is to support, the unconstrained demand. Okay. So at the end of the supply review, they identify the actions, and they identify, what are the issues in supply organization to fulfill the demand. Now we go back to the next. Okay, before that, I would like to ask if you have any questions. No?
All good. Thank you.
Okay, so now it's almost 1 hour. So do you want to take 2 minutes or 5 minutes break, or we are good to go?
I'm good to go.
Good to go. Yeah.
Yep, same here.
Okay, okay, perfect. Okay, so we move on to the next vertical, which is basically the inventory. Uh, Now, inventory, as you know, in the balance sheet, inventory is always reflected on the liability side. Okay, it's not the asset, but for certain organization, the inventory is basically asset. Although in the balance sheet it is on the right hand side, but because every person in the supply chain organization know, if you do not have the constraints of inventory target, you can improve your availability, and you can improve your service levels, because service level is directly proportional to the inventory targets. Okay, if you have more inventory, your service level will be always high. You can always have stocks in your warehouse, and whenever customer wants, you can always give you know inventory to the customer. But at the same time, having high inventory also is a high level of risk to the organization, because inventory is impacting the cash flow of the organization, because your liquid cash is blocked in terms of inventory. Okay, so it is not a good sign to have excess inventory. This is point number one. It is impacting your working capital. At the same time, it is also having high level of risk of the obsolete and obsolescence. For example, the stocks getting expired and stuff like that. So everybody knows what is working capital, right? Hello? Are you guys there?
Yes.
Okay, okay, okay. So basically, inventory, is basically blocking the working capital, or the free cash, I would say, for the organization. So that's why after the sales focus, there is always a focus from top management on the inventory. So top management would always push the organization to keep low inventory without impacting the service level. But having said this, the inventory has direct impact on the service level. But at the same time, if you improve your forecasting accuracy, you can even maintain the same level of service level, with the lowest inventory or the optimal inventory. So inventory is basically, it's called as a multi-stage inventory optimization. So what it means is, inventories are available in various levels within the organization. Some of the inventories are also at the vendor's place, which is basically the liability of the organization. For example, if a particular vendor has produced something for us, then that becomes our indirect liability. even if we lose the demand, we are supposed to accept that inventory because he has produced for us. Okay, so in short, that's a liability. Similarly, within the organization, right from the source of raw material, or the goods in transit from vendor to our premises, till the time we ship the goods to our customers, this entire value chain or this entire pipeline has always is always filled with inventory, which is the responsibility of supply chain and the organization. So basically, as I said, inventory is a byproduct of your demand plan. Your efficient demand planning, efficient supply planning will always help the inventory planner to manage the inventory in the better way. So what basically the job of the inventory management is, identify the demand, take the input from demand, take the input from supply review, and check the inventory balances, as to where he's heading. So he can always flag off to the management team saying that, the inventory is going high, or the inventory is going low, which may impact the the supply or the service level. At the same time, he or she has to have extremely high level of focus on the expiry or on the health of the inventory. So at any given point in time, inventory planner should be aware of how is the health of the inventory. It's not the total stocks which matters, but it's basically the health of the inventory is what it matters. So if you are carrying a stock for a longer time, even though it is a good stock, it is reported as an unrestricted stock in SAP terms, which is basically the good inventory. But it is there since last, let's say, 1 year, 2 year, then it will slowly move as aged stock in your books of account, which is not a good sign. So inventory planner has to always be in the center of demand planning as well as supply planning. That's why it's sitting in the center of this diagram, between the two, demand and supply, because the inventory planner has to give inputs to supply planner saying that, guys, you are producing this, but this guy is not selling it, so it is eventually sitting in the inventory. So these are the inputs that he can give to supply planning. At the same time, to the demand planner, he can say that, these are the inventory which are moving in the age stocks, and he need to put up the plan for liquidating the inventory. So it's always better, to liquidate the inventory before it expires, because sometimes the organization feels that, they will wait for the demand, okay, and they will not give any kind of discounts or to the customer to accept the inventory. But in actual, at the end of the cycle, once the inventory is expired, it becomes zero value to the organization, and it has to be dumped or it has to be scrapped. So these are the inputs which are supposed to be given by the inventory planner to the demand manager or to the commercial team, and push for liquidating the inventory and have the optimal inventory in the organization. Because on one side, this optimal inventory will also improve on the cash flow and the working capital of the organization. At the same time, it can also give them little headroom for the supply planning group to produce something more, to tap the unconstrained demand. So that's how the roles of the demand review, roles of supply review, and roles of inventory review works in the IBP process. Now, the next is, once we are done with IBP for demand, IBP for supply, and IBP for inventory, this reviews normally takes place in the first half of every month. And depending on the organization, strategies, they have the review horizon. Okay, there are majorly two horizons on which the organization work. One is the short-term horizon, which is from the current month till the 6 months, which they call as the short-term horizon. And the next horizon is the long-term horizon, which is basically from 7 to 24 months. So at any given point in time, generally, the organization has visibility of 2 years horizon as to what is happening. Okay, so as you move further, okay, after seventh, eighth, ninth month, you see greater accuracy, in your demand or in your forecast, as well as greater accuracy in your inventory planning. But the devil lies, within the short term horizon, because this is the horizon wherein you're working extremely close, with all the functions and trying to reduce the gap. And this is where you have a lot of challenges. So for any of the organization, you will see that the major challenges are always in the short term, wherein in the long term you see, the visibility improves, the accuracy improves, everything is good, looks good on the paper. So that's how, the horizon is built in the IBP process. Now the next is basically IBP for response and allocating. Okay, so what it does is, now the fourth pyramid or fourth box, it basically talks about, balancing the demand and supply. Now individually, demand planner has given the demand review results, supply planner has given the supply review results, inventory planner has given the inventory review results. Now the next course of action is to integrate these results. Okay, so these in the IBP for response, they integrate the results. Okay, like they will match the demand with supply, and the first thing that they will identify is a gap between demand and supply. Okay, unconstrained demand and unconstrained supply. So they will see unconstrained demand and unconstrained supply, and because both are unconstrained, these are, I would say, a little bit of a hypothetical numbers, okay, to certain extent, then the gap is very, very low for the unconstrained demand versus unconstrained supply, because even supply chain organization is not considering any supply. Demand organization is not considering any constraint. Okay, since both are unconstrained, so gap is very low. But this, but we have to be extremely careful, when we say unconstrained demand or when we say unconstrained supply, it has to be realistic. Okay, otherwise we lose, the purpose of this process. So if, for example, if a commercial manager or sales manager put unconstrained demand, and if a supply chain guy confirms that demand, and in actual, in spite of having the supply in place, if he's not able to sell, then that is not a realistic unconstrained demand. Okay, that's why it has to be extremely watchful and careful in putting the realistic demand. However, it has to be unconstrained. So as I said, the gap between unconstrained and realistic demand versus unconstrained and realistic supply is always low. The gap is low, wherein the gap between unconstrained demand and a constrained supply is always high. Okay, for example, commercial team said realistically they can sell 10,000 pounds of one product, but supply chain said they can only produce 5,000 pounds. So the gap is 5,000 pounds of this product, which is extremely high, which is 50%. Okay, so in this case, as a part of IBP for response, or it is also called as integrated review. In the integrated review scenario, the 5,000 pounds worth of gap needs to have some level of action plan from the supply planning organization, which will be submitted to the top management. Okay. Similarly, if the unconstrained demand is low and the unconstrained or the constrained supply is high, that means supply can produce more and demand can produce less, then there will be action plan on the demand planning or commercial organization to increase, the sales of that organization. So in the integrated review, okay, there is something which is called as, identifying the gap between demand and supply and generating the action plan at their levels. When I say their level, is at the IBP, at the demand manager level, at the inventory manager level, at the supply planning manager level. Okay, so they define the action plans for themselves and for their departments and their teams. Okay, at the same time, this integrated review also works on the allocation planning and order rescheduling, because they know that because of the constrained supplies, we are not able to fulfill some of the demand. Okay, so when the demand is high and supply is low, at that time the allocation comes into picture. That means, the sales manager will have a scenario wherein he has sales order for 10,000 pounds, but he only has supply of 5,000 pounds. Now it is basically, the decision of the sales team along with the top management as to this 5,000 pounds will be supplied to which customer. So this process is called as an allocation process. So depending on the organization, there are various levels of allocation process. One is basically the profitability, the customer which gives me maximum profit, I will sell this 5,000 pounds to that customer and I will earn more profit. So this can be one strategy of the organization. If the organization strategy talks about maximizing the profit, only maximizing the profit, yes, this fits well in the strategy. Go and ship this 5,000 pounds to this customer. But if some of the customers are key account customers or extremely important customers, then even their profit to the organization is low. We are supposed to give, share of our products to these customers to keep them running. So depending on the various strategies of the organization, the allocation process varies. So in the fourth vertical, basically the teams working on the allocation process to best fit, the supply with the demand or vice versa, and accordingly rescheduling the order. So these are the activities which takes place in the fourth box. Now, after each of these box, basically there are action plans. Okay. Now this action plan goes to the next level. You see the next box, which is called as IBP for SNOP, Sales and Operation Strategic Tactical Decision Process. So this is the team of top management. Okay, but this is not, the topmost management. I would say IBP for sales and operation planning is normally done by the mid-level and the senior managers. Okay, wherein a strategic and tactical decisions are taken. Okay, strategic decisions meaning, based on the inputs from demand planning, inventory, and supply planning. Okay, and the gap between demand and supply, they may take some tactical decision. Tactical is basically the operational decision, okay, which are in their hands. Okay, so these are the decisions which will be taken by the SNOP group, Sales and Operations group. At the same time, they identify the strategic decisions based on, the company's vision, mission, whatever it is. So they will come up with the strategic proposals. It's not decisions that they take, but based on, their DOA or delegation of authority in the organization, because every person has certain roles, certain responsibilities, and certain authorities. So based on the authority levels, they will define the proposals for the top management. So in this particular vertical, basically the decision making takes place for at the tactical level, that is at the operational level, as well as the strategic level. So the strategic decisions are basically then moved up in the ladder. And the last thing or the topmost thing that you see, in this diagram is basically supply chain control tower. Why it is called as a control tower is because, this is the place where all the processes are controlled by the top management. So they have a kind of bird's eye view, okay, and they are getting inputs from all the processes that are taken place in the organization during the month for a short term as well as for the long term basis. And the collated information comes to them as a single piece of paper with all, the information as to where the organization heading, what are the issues in the organization, what are the constraints in the organization, and what actions are being taken by the team members, and what are the strategic actions which are proposed by the teams for the top management approval. So this is the ladder in which, the majority of the decision takes place. And this helps the organization, this helps the top management to identify, the pulse of the organization as to where things are moving. Is it moving in the right direction? Is it moving in the wrong direction? So at the end of this cycle, we call it as a MBR, that is the management business review. So they take business review meeting and they identify, where are the gaps. So every month they define, the top management reports wherein they identify what are the gaps in the short term, what are the gaps in the long term, what are the actions taken in the short term, what are the actions taken in the long term. So in short, this identifies, the health of the organization. So in a nutshell, this is how, the IBP process operates at a high level. Okay. And this process works every month. Uh, and the standard acceptable horizon. However, there is no ground rule for defining the horizon, but the standard acceptable average horizon taken by most of the organization is 6 months for the short-term horizon and 24 months for the long-term horizon. However, in parallel, most of the organization have different budgeting plans. Like for example, they have 5 years budget plans, they have 10 years budget plan. So basically, these budgets are also driven or also calculated based on the 2 years plan. Okay, so basically they understand the pulse of the organization as to what is the growth rate of the organization, and in 5 years down the line, where will we reach. So this is how, the IBP process is formulated, and at a high level, this is how it works. So do you have any questions?
No questions, but just one more clarification, if you can. Could you
Yeah.
quickly go constrained and the key differentiation between constrained and unconstrained
Okay. Okay.
from a demand
So
planning stand? Yeah.
okay. Now, from the demand planning perspective, as I said, constraint is basically, a set of mind of a commercial team member, okay, of a sales guy who's identifying the forecast. Okay. So what happens is, because he's very closely engaged with the supply chain team members, he knows what are the issues in the organization. I won't say in the supply chain, but in the organization. It may be because of the lack of raw material. He will know that for a particular product, I will receive only constraint forecast. Okay, I will receive only constraint supply. For example, if a product is there, product A, the demand may be there for 10,000 pounds. Okay, but he knows, the sales guy knows our organization can only produce 5,000 pounds because they are missing the raw material. Okay, so what he will do is, in order to improve the forecasting accuracy, because he is also measured for the forecasting accuracy. Or if he puts 10,000 pounds as the forecast, and if he's not able to deliver 10,000, his KPI would get affected by end of the month. So he knows the constraint. So he will put the forecast as 5,000 pounds because he knows the supply chain team can only give me 5,000. So this is called as a constrained forecasting. That means a person who is entering the forecast knows that there are constraints from the supply organization. So he is reducing his forecast and inputting, less forecast. So this we call as a constraint forecast. However, organization in the IBP process supports unconstrained forecast. That means they tell the sales team, guys, you don't bother about the supply constraint. That's the job of supply chain organization. Your job is to put unconstrained forecast. Even though you know that some of the products are not going to get supplied, but you have to put your realistic demand in place. Okay, so that supply chain team gets the realistic demand and they will work on those actions. Okay, otherwise you can imagine if the forecast itself is low, supply chain will take this as an input and they will only start to produce 5,000 pounds in this case, not the 10,000 pounds. And if the actual order comes for 10,000 pounds, then we will miss the demand. And end of the day, supply planner will say that, guys, you have put only forecast for 5,000. I delivered you 5,000 and my job is done. Are you getting me?
That was much more clear. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So that's why, organization wants to see what is the potential of the organization or what is the potential of market, where we can sell the product. So that's why they always push for unconstrained forecast and they push for unconstrained supply. Then we check the gap of unconstrained forecast versus constrained supply. Okay, so this will give you a gap of supply, demand versus supply, and this will put some actions for the supply planning organization to maybe install one more machine, so that the capacity is increased to identify or, to identify an additional vendor or the supply of raw material sources to get more raw material supplies on in place. Okay, so this is how it operates. So any other questions related to whatever we discussed so far? No? Shall we move on?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we move on to the next slide. This is, as I mentioned, the SAP IBP is a cloud offering based on SAP HANA technology. Nowadays, all these servers are basically a cloud-based server. Okay, the main reason for that is, it is extremely cost effective, and you can store as much information as you want based on your requirement. For example, and the confidentiality is maintained, like, your information or your data sets are extremely confidentially kept in the server. They do not, get you. I mean, they are not. There is associated, less level of associated risk of misuse of data. And whenever you require more server space, you can always tell them in a short notice that these are the days when we are going to do something, so we require additional servers capacity. So that's why most of these technologies are cloud based, because it is extremely cost effective, it has got good amount of flexibility, and it gives a very faster response to your needs. Okay, the figure shows different modules in SAP and what processes they support. So I already explained in the wider scope, demand IBP for demand, IBP for supply, IBP for inventory, and integrated business planning review. Okay, the integration of all those. Some of the organization may also have the product management review. Some of the organization, if it is a marketing driven organization or if it is service level organization, This predominantly we are talking about, the organization, the manufacturing organization, or the organization which is into producing goods and shipping. If it is a service level organization, then their IBP cycle will have different sets of parameters within demand planning. So for example, for a service level organization, a demand review will talk about services. It talks about improving the services, improving the customer base, something like that. So based on the organization structure in the umbrella of IBP, the processes are designed to suit as per their requirement. So these individual functionalities come together to support the SNOP process. As I said, SNOP has been widely accepted process working since ages. IBP is an extended version of that because IBP integrates, not only the processes but also people, and it gives you a completely integrated plan. And the most importantly, it gives you single operating plan wherein SNOP to certain extent had multiple operating plans floating within the organization, which a lot of times created the confusion to the top management. So the topmost layer is the visualization layer to get high level view. As I said, the top management is a control tower, is a bird's eye view to look at the pulse of the organization, the health and status of supply chain organization. So this is how the IBP work. Okay, now getting into a little bit of a deep dive. So guys, just let me know if you want a break or something like that. Okay, even a 2 minutes break, refresher. If you want a bio break, do you want to have a bio break for 2 or 5 minutes?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So little bit deep dive about the same diagram. So we'll start off with this IBP for demand. Okay, as I explained to you, in this statistical forecasting and demand sensing capabilities are combined with flexible collection of managerial judgment and consensus demand decisions. So as I said, you know, sales organization will put the unconstrained demand. The demand planner will check the statistical forecast based on the algorithms, and he will try to map the same. And in case of any issues, he can challenge in a healthy way. He can challenge the sales team, saying that guys, whatever you are projecting is not in line with the sales history, or it's not in line with the past history of the organization. Are you really want to sell this? Then commercial organization will again check. In some cases, he may say, yes, my customer has certain plans in place, which will inflate the demand to certain extent. Or there are certain things going in the market. Like, for example, if one of the competitor is having issues in supplies, so that can also increase the demand for your organization. So these are the typical issues, which sales team is well aware of, and they may want to capitalize on that. That's the reason they may put little high forecast. So this is a very, very healthy discussion between supply planner, or sorry, a demand planner and this sales team. And at the end of this review, a consensus forecast or the agreed forecast between sales and demand planner is finalized. So if there is no consensus between sales and demand planner, then this process will not work. Okay, so at the end of the cycle, at the end of demand review, there has to be a consensus between agreement between sales team and demand planner that okay, we both agree, and this is the number for this month, and these are the numbers for next 6 months and 24 months horizon. So this is how the IBP for demand. Then on the right hand side, we spoke about IBP for supply, wherein we spoke about the tactical rough cut supply planning as well as operational response and supply planning. So this is where the unconstrained demand is taken into consideration. The supply constraints are put against that, and the action is defined, that the tactical action plan, the operational action plan, and to certain extent also if there are some decision making required by the top management, then the strategic proposals are pushed to the next level, that is for the SNOP. Similarly, IBP for inventory at the bottom. This is the inventory planning solution with real multi-athlon capabilities to optimize the stock. So inventory planner has to keep inventory at the optimal level, because overall the organization will have certain level of targets, and if his inventory is increasing for a product A, then he has to compromise on product B, because he cannot exceed the overall target. So this guy is always under a lot of pressure, because he is between the demand planner and the supply planner, and he has to balance both of them. The next level is IBP for sales and operations. Okay, so this is where the demand and supply review and the integrated review takes place. No, I think we missed the one in between, the integrated review. Okay, in integrated review, basically the gaps are identified. Okay, the unconstrained demand versus unconstrained supply, very less gaps, because both are unconstrained and both are realistic but little bit hypothetical. Okay, then the next set of action is unconstrained demand and constrained supply. So there you will see major gaps, because your demand is unconstrained, it is 10,000 pounds. Your supply is constrained, it is 5,000 pounds. So the gap is only almost 50%. So you will have detailed level of action. Second is constrained demand and unconstrained supply. Okay, that means your demand is low, but your supply is high. So whether you can have any actions for the sales team to go in the market, identify new customers, identify new markets, and increase the business. Okay, something like this. So this is taken place in the integrated review, and the major operational decisions or the tactical decisions are signed off in the integrated review. However, for the high level decisions, like strategic decision, like the investments, like the installation of machines, or any other strategic investment that is required by the organization. In that case, the topmost management's buying is required. So that takes place the proposal is put forward by the sales and operations planning, and the top proposals are signed off, or actions are defined by the top management. So the top management has a bird's eye view. They will look at the pulse of the organization and where the organization is heading. So top management will also send the message to all the teams down the line, the different teams like demand, inventory, response, and they will time to time give them the inputs as to if there is any strategic initiatives needs to be taken, or there are any changes in the strategy. They basically communicate to the down the line, so that everybody in the organization is aligned and they are working for a common goal. Okay, any doubts, any questions? Move on.
All good.
Okay. Okay, now for the last 1.5 hour, we were discussing about the process, how the process works, what exactly is done by demand planner, what exactly is done by supply planner, what exactly is done by inventory planner, so on and so forth. Now, what are the tools, or what are the inputs that is basically available within IBP, within the umbrella of IBP? So it's basically IBP mainly focuses on the most effective and flexible tools, because IBP is designed in such a way that, it tries to build maximum flexibility within the organization. Okay. So more the flexible organization is, more adaptable it is to the change, and it can have faster response to the changes in the market. So some of the tools are basically highlighted here, which are used by the organization. Like for example, complete scalable model. Okay, you can see on one side you can see demand, one side you can see supply, and one side you can see finance. So basically, it talks about demand, supply chain, and financial model at aggregate and detail level. Okay, so as I mentioned, in the IBP process, finance also plays an extremely important role, because finance guy is the only guy who's normally present in all the reviews. He's also present in the demand review, because he's interested in what is the demand, because they have to basically put up the reports or the projections for the revenues, for the profit margins, and EBITDA, stuff like that. So they are participating in the demand review so that they get 24 months horizon, or next 5 years horizon, whatever is the plan. So they know what exactly is happening in the demand review, what is the unconstrained demand in terms of. So they may not be very much interested in terms of volume, but they are extremely interested in terms of value. Okay, so demand manager will talk about volume, but they will always, finance team or finance manager will always try to take inputs in terms of revenue, in terms of dollar value. Okay, so they will understand the gap between demand, supply, and where exactly is the organization heading. So this is how the finance team's role in the IBP process. So next point here is basically real time what if scenario. Okay. So these are basically the permutations and combinations as to what exactly can happen, what exactly can go right, or what exactly can go wrong. So we have to basically balance what is going wrong and try to anticipate the issues. So what if analysis basically talks about something like 5 why study. You ask 5 times why, and you get the root cause of the problem, something like that. So similarly, it is basically uh, identifying the problem, or anticipating the problem before it arrives, so that you have right set of solutions, when the actual problem comes. The next one is collaboration. As I mentioned, IBP predominantly talks about on the predominantly built on the pillars of communication, collaboration, flexibility. So collaboration within the teams is extremely important, and you always have to respect the feelings of other departments, because we may not have full visibility of what other person is working on. There is something which is always invisible to us, which only that person who's in that role knows. For example, I have worked in so many different roles, right from demand planning, supply planning, customer service, warehouse. So I know what are the constraints of individual roles and what are the key strengths of various roles. So collaboration and respect to each and every person in the organization is equally responsible, important for the successful achievement of the KPIs for the organization. The next one is an extremely important topic. It's called as a user interface. Now IBP in itself has a tool, which collects the data, and it processes the data, and it generates the meaningful outputs from the data. But at the same time, as if IBP is very user friendly in terms of user interface. Like IBP data can be easily converted into Excel spreadsheet, You can generate, the graphs, you can generate the reports, you can generate Pareto graphs, you can generate waterfalls, you can generate whatever type of reports you may want to, taking the inputs from IBP into Excel and convert that into a meaningful data. So that's a very, very key aspect of IBP is, it generates an extremely good user interface. And as we go forward, when we have, the lab activities, we will get into the details of how IBP, is helpful in converting the data into meaningful reports. The next one is basically unified data model. So this is basically, as I said, one data model across demand, supply, and finance. So single operating plan is what in a short term we call it as. So the whole objective of IBP is to have single operating plan. Every person in the organization should only work on one plan. Like if I work on a different plan, being a supply planner, and demand planner has shared me a plan which is totally different from what I am working upon, then there is always a conflict, which will lead to unsuccessful uh, organizations. The next one is real-time analytics. Nowadays, we have lots of tools related to the business analytics, and now there are a lot of mostly most of the organization has the supply chain analyst as a part of their organization. There are a lot of roles within the organization for analyst. In the earlier organizations, we used to have only business analyst or the analyst team working especially for the finance team or purchasing team, for the negotiation parts, something like that. But now you see a lot of analysts are being hired in the supply chain organization. They work on data, they work on business analytics, and they generate such a beautiful reports, which are extremely meaningful and which are really helping the organization to take right decisions at the right time. So business analytics is extremely important, for supply chain and for the IBP. The next one is basically, a response time, a fast, high performance in memory, column oriented, rational database. So this basically is a kind of a database tool, you know, which is generating extremely high database. It's like SAP HANA, which talks about high performance analytics, So within a few fraction of seconds, you will generate the data sets into meaningful reports. Okay. The last one is basically integrating the data. Like for example, you have a set of demand review data, you have set of supply review data. Now you need to have a tool which basically integrates these two data and delivers the report which are meaningful in nature. For example, the gap between demand and supply. So basically, with the help of these reports, you can identify a lot of action items. You can track these action items, and you can get over the issues within the organization. So that's why it is extremely important to have high level of flexibility in the tools. The tools has to be modern, like it has to be always upgraded based on the recent developments in the market. It needs to always work upon the volatility and the complexity, because most of the organization has high level of volatility or even high level of complexity and even the variability. Like the demand may be stable in some months, but for certain months it will be very fluctuating. So it's extremely important to identify those months, when the market is not behaving in the right fashion. Or for example, the unforeseen scenarios like what has happened in COVID, you know, in the time of COVID, because nobody has got any um response time to react to COVID. Most of the organizations, had huge amount of stocks when the COVID crisis came, and that's the reason the entire market collapsed, because the demand immediately dropped to almost zero. There were a lot of incoming supplies in the pipeline, and many small players, many small vendors were impacted extremely badly because they were left out with the inventory, which was eventually could not be sold. And inventory, as I said, is blocking the cash of the organization. So, so your model has to be extremely flexible. I won't say that, the situation like COVID will come again, but in the near future, we need to identify how, the market is operating. So it's extremely important to understand, how where the market is heading, what are the driving factors to the market, what are the driving forces to the market, and these are the inputs which are mostly available with the commercial team. So these inputs, even though they are not in the numerical terms, it has to be converted into a numerical terms and put it as a part of your forecast. So the more interaction you have, with your customers, with your stakeholders, the more accurate will be your forecast. And if your forecast is accurate, then your entire IBP cycle improves. Your health of the organization will improve, your KPIs will improve. So if you control input to the organization, I think most of the things will automatically, fall in place. So we move on to the next slide. So IBP is completely scalable with unified data model. Okay, so you can scale IBP based on your entire data sets. So ideally, IBP covers all the processes within the organization. When I say organization, mainly the operations organization. When I say operations is basically, the start from demand planning till the products are delivered to the customer. So what are the different value chains within these work streams? All are captured in the IBP process. It offers a simplified data integration to and from SAP IBP with an easy use Excel user interface. As I said, I think Excel is the only tool which is extremely user interfaced, extremely easy to use, and most of the team members within commercial organization, sales organization, or supply chain organization, they are using Excel very frequently. We have advanced Excel, but you don't need to learn advanced Excel to do the simulation of the IBP. Only simple Excel pivot tables and reports and VLOOKUP stuff like that will also help you to convert the data into meaningful sets of report. So this is an extremely important advantage of IBP from the user interface perspective. As I mentioned, it offers easy collaboration within and between in the demand supply planner, finance sales group. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is not only the process which gets integrated, it's people which gets integrated in the IBP process. So every single person in the organization knows the constraint or issues in the other department, and also they know what is going well in the other department. So in a nutshell, everybody knows what's happening in the organization, which is extremely useful for everybody to understand where we are heading. So that's why it talks about good amount of collaboration within internal groups, such as demand planning, supply planning, finance, and sales group. And if there are other functions like marketing or product manager, they are all also part of this. Okay, it provides what if scenarios capabilities. What is what if scenarios? What if scenarios are nothing but identifying what can go wrong, anticipating the issues, in a nutshell, or doing kind of a brainstorming to identify what can potentially go wrong. What if analysis normally is done for the new product, launch, wherein the marketing team normally drives, you know, the brainstorming session when all the ideas are collected, what can go wrong, what can go right, how can we, react to this situation, how can we react to this situation, something like that. So it is basically, predicting what can potentially go wrong and what needs to be fixed, so as to improve the overall operations. Time. Any questions?
Nope, I'm good.
Victoria, Shana, any questions for you?
No.
Nothing for me.
Yeah. So I think we have only 6 minutes left. So because this is a quite a complex, slide, I would like to take it tomorrow, because as a fresh. So if you have any doubts, for the today's session, we can use next 5 minutes, to clear the doubts. Or we can go and review the apps. Okay, in the LMS, are you able to see the LMS screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So do you all have access to this LMS, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
Yes.
I think Victoria, you both also have access. So in here, if you click on the materials, you see here the PPTs and the lab and the assignments. So I will just quickly go through this first lab. So this document basically talks about the process. It is the SOP of how the lab activity needs to be carried out. Okay. So if you go through this, I would request you go through this once, so that and if you already have the access, you can try, if this process is working, and if you are able to access the database. Anybody is there from the support team? Sagar, you are there?
Yes, please tell me, sir.
Okay, so basically they have access, so they can use this SOP and do the lab activity, correct?
Yes.
Or for example, it talks about how do you what all things steps you need to follow, to access the database. For example, you open the IBP system, you need to access the credentials. I think you have the credentials, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you already using the IBP tool, all of you?
Yes.
Or only some of you?
We all are.
Okay, so from whatever we discussed today, what are the activities that you doing in your organization in the IBP review? We can start with Vaibhav if you want, Vaibhav.
Hey, thank you. So based on what we discussed, what I do right now is I'm part of the demand planning team. So I do the monthly demand reviews and build that consensus with the sales team. I haven't really used statistical forecasting, hence, my interest is in learning that. But what I have been doing for the past few months is looking at historicals and identifying trends and calling out outliers to the sales team, and then building a consensus in the one-to-ones with the sales team, which is followed by which is done after the demand review. That's what I've been doing.
Okay, great. So you're on the right track. Okay, Victoria, are you also using IBP? And
I am. I came from the supply side,
Mhm.
so I have more of the experience looking at the demand that was entered by the demand team and looking at any of the constraints across the different lines in order to provide the supply side of it.
Okay. So Vaibhav, going back to you, so do you use the unconstrained forecast, or your forecast is always a constrained forecast? Or you don't know whether it is? Okay.
It's an unconstrained forecast.
Okay. Okay, that's really good. That's really good. Okay, then Victoria, based on the forecast, you take the input from Vaibhav's team, and then you identify, what are the supply possibilities, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and Shana, what exactly is your role?
So I'm the UK demand planner, so relatively the same on the demand side. I'm doing the demand reviews. We have started playing with statistical forecasting a little bit in the UK. That is a slow going process though. But yeah, it's mainly on the demand side, so inputting forecasts, trend analysis, etc.
Okay, great. Okay, so any specific questions related to today's session? Is there anything that you didn't understand and you want me to repeat it again tomorrow morning, or get into little more details of specific topics, something like that?
Nothing for me.
Nothing from me either. Yeah.
Okay, then I think I will just request you all to just go through this lab activity module 1 document and just try to use it if you get some time. Okay, and tomorrow we'll revisit this again and we'll start the session tomorrow. Okay, is it fine to close it now? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay then, guys, thank you very much for joining today. Okay, see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to ask your questions in the comment section below, and we will reply to them at the earliest.